Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Thomas. Today we're back here with SCP Explained, and we are taking on the Versus franchise, or at least the series. Sorry. Anyway, so this one's called Could Homelander's Ego Crush the SCP Foundation? So yeah, Homelander's decided to declare war on the Foundations, but I'm actually kind of curious to see if it actually can stop them. Let's see if the Foundation can do what the boys have yet to do yet. I know in the comics they do destroy them, but let's see how they do. The Foundation, I mean. So be sure to like, subscribe for more. Hope you enjoy. Let's go.
The SCP Foundation has dealt with its fair share of superheroes. From the delightful SCP-2800, the prickly Scottish vigilante known as Cactus Man, to the utterly tragic SCP-2241, also known as the superhero wannabe. But we couldn't help but wonder, what if the SCP Foundation went up against a truly evil anomalous force that simply masqueraded as a superhero? And we couldn't think of a character who fits this bill better than Homelander from The Boys, the hit TV series produced by our arch-nemesis at Amazon. Homelander is rotten to the core, and has a wide range of superpowers that allow him to make his darkest desires a reality. And that's why today, we're powering up the Anomatron 6000, filling it with all 3 current seasons of The Boys, and posing the big question. Could the SCP Foundation bring this sadistic soup to his knees, or is he just too diabolical? Let's find out. People love superheroes. They love that warm, cozy feeling that soups give them, a golden beacon of righteousness to swoop out of the sky and save the day so we don't have to do it ourselves. But you see, the thing about superheroes is they aren't always nice. If the whole world holds someone up on a pedestal, makes them believe from a young age that they can do no wrong, that they're the ultimate paragon of virtue, and that they have the powers and freedom to do anything they want, well, you end up with him, the Homelander. Now, some look to Homelander as a hero, and why wouldn't they? He flies around saving people, wearing those distinctive stars and stripes on his back, and stars in all those movies about how great he is. But that's just a cover story, the publicly acceptable story put out by Vought, the company responsible for creating him in the first place. They're there to sweep under the rug any bad thing that Homelander or any of their so-called superheroes has ever done, so that nobody will ever figure out the truth. And what is the truth? Well, as far as soups go, Homelander's even worse than the very worst of the worst. He's a murderous, self-absorbed, narcissistic psychopath with no empathy for powerless human beings. He thinks of himself as superior to the rest of us. Ordinary people are just expendable, and he'll gladly allow an entire plane full of innocent civilians to die with little care or remorse. Oh, but Homelander will play all that up for the cameras, though. Which is why nobody would ever think to question his status as a hero. As far as the public knows, Homelander's actions are always justified, and that he can do no wrong. And it's this—
Yeah, if only the people knew the truth, that he was a prick. Which, honestly, we know because we're outside the universe, so easy enough to, you know, just see, look in and be like, yep, absolute prick. Anyway.
This mentality that allows him to carry on doing whatever he wants with total impunity. But what if everyone turned on Homelander? Say his cover was finally blown and the rest of the world got to see him as he really is. A murderer with too much power, rampant insecurity, an explosive temper, and some nasty, lingering parental issues. Sure, getting a look at the real Homelander might be a cause for celebration from his most hardcore fanboys, allowing them to rally behind what they think he stands for. But what if we all had enough? What if everybody rejected Homelander? As it turns out, that might be the final straw that breaks him. By his own admission, Homelander would much prefer to be loved by everyone. But if you take that away, he's more than happy to settle for being feared. And with the level of power that he has, flight, super strength, invulnerability, heat vision, all it would take would be a show of his abilities in order to incite fear. And now, it's happened. The love anyone had for Homelander is gone. Maybe his crimes have finally been exposed, or he might have laser visioned someone in broad daylight. Regardless of the spark that started it, the fire has started burning. and now he's no longer chained. Homelander is free to do whatever he wants. He started tactically taking out key structures of influence in the United States. The White House went first, the red-hot beams of his laser eyes carving through the entire building, separating staff and Secret Service members at the waist or the neck, splattering the walls with blood. The, quote, world's greatest superhero took care of the president personally, melting him down with his heat vision before flying away. Next on his list of targets was the Pentagon, shrugging off bullets and tank shells from the United States military as they were rapidly deploying to stop him. It didn't take long for Homelander to cut through the soldiers sent to stop him, before demolishing the Pentagon with as little as a supersonic clap of his hands. As the building crumbled around him, so did a number of the country's defenses fall as well. But there was one last line of defense. One organization that just might have access to the means to bring the only man in the sky back down to ground level. The SCP Foundation were no strangers to powerful beings running amok, but they were the only ones with the means to oppose a rampage like this. Now, while Homelander had already decimated much of the regular armed forces, the Foundation brought an army of their own to bear. Enter the Mobile Task Forces, the organization's most elite special operatives. They're specifically trained to deal with threats well beyond the capabilities of the regular military and can be quickly deployed almost anywhere in the world at a moment's notice, ready for action. Mobilizing their collected forces, the Foundation dispatched its MTFs at once. They had to be smart. Homelander was playing this tactically, taking out centers of influence and defense capabilities, still unleashing his years' worth of bottled-up rage, but using it in a controlled, calculated way. If they sent every mobile task force to where Homelander was, he could easily fly away at supersonic speeds, outmaneuver them, or just disintegrate the Foundation's entire reserve of troops in one move. So their primary goal was to divide and conquer, and spread their MTFs across the country so that anywhere Homelander went, they would be waiting for him. Of course, the fall of the regular military had already shown that conventional weapons had little to no effect on Homelander. He is completely resistant to almost every form of physical harm, not only completely bulletproof, but unfazed by explosions as well. On top of that, his powers for detecting threats were also unparalleled. Homelander had the ability to see through almost any solid object or surface using X-ray vision. However, the Foundation knew there was a limit to this ability, and that the soup couldn't see through certain metals, specifically zinc. He also had tremendous olfactory and auditory senses, well beyond that of any ordinary human being. Homelander could detect changes in smell on such an acute level that he could detect changes to someone's adrenaline levels, as well as using that ability to detect explosives. But it was his super hearing that the Foundation was planning to exploit. They knew Homelander's senses were so attuned, he could detect changes in a person's heartbeat, enough to know when someone was lying. However, having such a high level of sensitive hearing meant that Homelander had at least one vulnerability: high-frequency sound waves. The Foundation knew it wouldn't be enough to kill the man in the sky, but they had another trick up their sleeve for that. First, they needed to draw him out. But how would they, when Homelander could easily overhear the orders being broadcast to their troops? Simple, they could lie. The Foundation started issuing falsified directions to its MTFs on the ground. Each one followed up with a written digital message via each troop's heads-up display. All Foundation operatives were reminded to disregard any radio communications, that these weren't real orders, merely just interference to throw Homelander off what they were actually doing. While the fake radio orders were attempting to nudge Homelander closer and closer towards New York, which was where Vought Tower, his headquarters, were located, one team was already there lying in wait: Mobile Task Force Pi 1, also known by the codename City Slickers. They had received a coded message from the Foundation. They were instructed to infiltrate Vought Tower, retrieve an item from the company's research and development labs, and then make their way to the roof. Once they were there, the next stage of the plan was to administer what they found in R&D, and await an airdrop of high-frequency sonic weaponry that the Foundation was sending to aid them. Storming Vought Tower had been the surprisingly easy part. The entire company had fallen into chaos. Now that their number one product was raining death from the sky, the employees at Vought didn't seem to care much about their jobs anymore. The city's...
Yeah, honestly, if I was Vought and I saw that, it wasn't in this situation, and I saw these guys going in, like, Oh, here's Homelander's weakness. We made sure to include it in case he ever gone rogue. Which, let's be real, if you're making a superhero, just make sure you got something in case they go bananas like this. I mean, sure, there might be a possibility you won't, but yeah, better safe than sorry after all. Better safe than sorry. Anyway.
The Slickers had snuck into the laboratory and found what they were sent for. Temporary Compound 5, a chemical that would alter human biology and grant anyone superpowers for a 24-hour period. It had the nasty side effect of turning the user's brain into Swiss cheese, but under the circumstances, it seemed necessary. Dosing themselves with it, all the City Slickers were in agony as they felt the V-24 burning in their veins. Just as the chopper was arriving to drop off their weaponry, a loud, booming sound rang out, shattering windows across the city as Homelander's approach broke the sound barrier. The MTF stared up in horror as his laser vision cut through the helicopter above their heads, one of the crates landing on the roof as the fiery wreck plummeted down towards the street.
Jackson!
The team leader yelled to one of his men before pausing. He knew that if he told him to retrieve the sonic cannon, Homelander would destroy it in seconds. Instead, Jackson watched as his commanding officer leaped up into the air hundreds of feet higher than he would normally have been capable of. He careened towards a surprised Homelander, swinging a Compound V-fueled uppercut that connected with his jaw, reeling him slightly as he hovered above. Taking that as their cue, the other members of the City Slickers started attacking the out-of-control Soup. One of them was firing energy blasts from his palms, and another had her arms stretching out like rubber, grabbing Homelander's cape in an attempt to drag him out of the sky. Meanwhile, Jackson was scrambling across the roof of the tower, fumbling with the clasps on the crate that contained the weapon. He could hear snarling behind him as Homelander roared in disapproval, disgusted that these so-called ordinary people were daring to attack him. His heat vision burned through the City Slickers' uniforms, but couldn't pierce their skin. Enraged, Homelander gripped the commander's head as he made another jump towards him, pushing both his super-strong hands together until he could hear the man's skull beginning to crack. Then he kept squeezing. Flattening the commander between his palms, Homelander flew downwards, landing a dual-fisted punch that burst through the chests of the other two Slickers. He pulled both hands back, his red gloves, like the rest of his uniform, already slickened with copious amounts of blood. Then, a loud shrieking sound pierced his attuned ears as Jackson fired the sonic cannon. The cacophony of high-frequency sound waves it emitted were deafening to Homelander's attuned, sensitive ears, sending pain shooting through his head. Unfortunately, pain meant little to Homelander, and he could still function despite it. It angered him even further that someone was trying to best him, that they'd highlighted and tried to exploit a weakness, something the Soup had told himself he didn't have. He shot forwards lightning fast, wrenching the device out of Jackson's hands before gripping him by the throat, lifting him up off his feet so that he was dangling over the edge of the tower. "Who in the hell do you think you are?" Homelander muttered, disturbingly subdued despite the obvious unhinged look in his eyes. "Just..." Jackson gasped for breath as he felt fingers clasping around his fault. In the distance, there was a low, rhythmic rumbling, like an earthquake, or heavy footsteps getting closer. "Just a distraction." With that, Homelander's hand closed tight the very second that Jackson teleported out of his grip, leaving the Soup standing on the roof alone, save for the bodies of the other City Slickers. He turned to face the sound of the oncoming footsteps, detecting the sound of whirring machinery along with it. This was something new. It was rare for Homelander to ever face a real challenge. Nothing ever forced him to improve his skills in combat. In most cases, he could just rely on his strength, or bring a quick end to confrontations with his eye lasers, which made the sight of SCP-5514 approaching all the more surprising to him. Striding across the city like something out of a Pacific Rim movie was a gigantic mech, known as SCP-5514, or by its far cooler-sounding nickname, the Dragon Slayer. Working with the Global Occult Coalition and High Brazil, the Foundation themselves constructed SCP-5514 using various anomalous methods, designing the machine to combat large-scale aggressors, or LSAs. While the Dragon Slayer, like the name implies, was built with fighting monsters and kaiju similar to its own size, these desperate times had called for desperate measures. The mech's huge robotic arm hosted its primary weapon, a cold iron sword, its blade 20 meters long. Inside, Mobile Task Force Eta-5, the Jaeger bombers, were piloting the Dragon Slayer, readying for battle with Homelander. He was staying still, not attempting to run or even fly away. Instead, he stayed at the top of Vought Tower. It was like he was waiting, watching, unfazed by the approaching humanoid machine, looking right at it, or through it. The Dragon Slayer brought its cold iron sword swooping down through the air, the blade coming right down on where Homelander stood. It cleaved directly through the building beneath him, carving Vought Tower in two, sending a shower of glass and concrete over the plaza below.
Careful,
the soup caught the blade as it came at him, screaming in pain as he felt it cut into his hands. Any wound left by the cold iron sword was permanent. There was no regeneration or recovering from it. Homelander's natural durability gave him an edge. That, and being so much smaller than the sword itself, allowed him not to be sliced to pieces, but even touching it through his gloves hurt. The tower was rubble. Homelander was down, but far from out. He climbed up through the debris and bodies he was buried under, not caring when he blasted his heat vision through the dead and wounded to clear a path back up. Looming above, the Dragon Slayer stood taller than most buildings, his eyes glowing both with anger and the red light of his lasers. Homelander pushed himself up off the ground and flew up into the air. The mech's arm moved weightlessly to swat him out of the air, but Homelander used his speed and momentum to shoot through the metal, ripping through the machine's hand before it could land a strike. Homelander started zipping out of the path of the Dragon Slayer as it opened fire with its various anomalous armaments. While the mech was primarily used for close-quarters melee combat with various LSAs, it also featured a number of longer-range weaponry. Mounted on SCP-5514's shoulder was a Beowulf Sigurd railgun, an anomalous weapon that could use altered gravity to affect the weight of its targets, causing projectiles to impact with higher velocity. Yet none of these projectiles landed a shot, unable to catch Homelander at his current flight speed. With every supersonic pass he made of the Dragon Slayer, the deranged soup took another look at his current enemy. His X-ray eyes could penetrate most of the metal and gave him a clear enough view of what was inside. There was a miniature sun powering it, kept perpetually stable while it generated energy for SCP-5514. Surrounding it were subdimensional portals, venting the excess heat off this plane of reality so that the mech and nothing around it melted. A similar process was moving some of the substantial weight of the mech into a tiny pocket dimension, which had allowed it to move so swiftly without being too cumbersome. Piloting it were humans, more MTF operatives. Spotting them through the metal hull, Homelander flew towards the Dragon Slayer like a bullet. The force of the impact caused the mech to wobble slightly as Homelander shot through the outer layers of armor. He came bursting out into the main chamber, eyes burning intense lasers through the vital inner components of the Dragon Slayer. The beam sliced the unprotected MTFs up, reducing them to a bloody paste before Homelander turned his rage towards the power source. Ripping through more of the metalwork, he looked at the housing for the subdimensional portals venting out of the mini-sun's heat. Though he had a limited understanding of what exactly this all was, Homelander could make sense of what it was doing. He fired off another series of blasts with his heat beams, tearing through the devices that regulated the portals before flying back out of the Dragon Slayer as fast as he could. Landing at its feet, he looked up to see his despicable handiwork. From within, the subdimensional portals began pulling the insides of SCP-5514 in different directions, pulling it apart and sucking it into different pocket dimensions as it collapsed in on itself. Homelander sighed, the tiniest hint of fatigue he felt passing in a fleeting moment, gone before the Dragon Slayer eventually fell. "Enough! Cease this villainy!" a voice called from nearby.
Hey.
Homelander sighed in exasperation to face this latest nuisance that dared oppose him. When he saw the shadowy figure approaching him, he was taken aback at first, thinking he recognized who it was. "Noir?" he asked in disbelief. "No, that is not my name," the dark-clad figure announced. "Homelander of the Seven, your time has come. For now, you face the Spectre." Otherwise known as SCP-4494, was the physical embodiment of crime fighting itself. Its long, dark cloak whipped in the wind, a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, giving it the appearance of a shadowy gunslinger. From head to toe, the Spectre seemed to pull all light on the visible spectrum into itself, making it look like a ghostly shadow come to life. And how the hell do they expect you to stop me? Homelander sneered. I go wherever injustice reigns, the Spectre replied, not short on dramatic flair. And you have unleashed horrific, unspeakable terror on the innocents of this world. I will ask you once, and once only. Stop this. Walk away. Immediately, Homelander started laughing. Really? That's all you've got? He scoffed. Just asking nicely. You have lost your way, SCP-4494 declared. All this destruction, and for what? Just to display your power? To subjugate? Make people fear you? Or are you still trying to win the approval of a mother and father you never had? The last sentence struck a nerve with Homelander, enough to make him zip forward, launching a punch at the Spectre. His fist passed through a dark fog that took the place of its intended target, as SCP-4494 dissipated and then reformed behind Homelander. It put two shadowy arms around his neck, gripping the maddening soup in a headlock. You were made to be a hero, the Spectre whispered. Look at how far you've fallen. Homelander angrily wrenched the arm away and threw his captor over his head, only for the Spectre to become a mist again, surrounding the hero in a thick, black cloud. He fired his heat vision again, the beams passing through the layer of fog without causing any damage. It's over, Homelander. No longer will you terrorize the innocent, came a booming, dramatic voice from all angles. You are not the hero you think of yourself as, but a villain. This mistake stops here. This isn't a mistake. I don't make mistakes, Homelander roared. I'm not like the rest of you. I'm stronger, smarter, I'm better. I am better. I'm the real hero. Are you? Echoed the Spectre's voice. Something thin and papery landed at Homelander's feet, the fog dissipating again as the Spectre stood before him. Confused, Homelander picked up the papery object. It was a comic book. The words Action Comics emblazoned on the top. The cover showed a man dressed much like himself, lifting an old green car above his head, his red cape billowing in the wind. A letter S worn across his chest. As he flicked through the pages, tears formed in Homelander's eyes. This is what you think you are, the Spectre said solemnly. But look around. Look at the lives you've taken or ruined. A hero? No. Heroism is not subjugating others, not viewing yourself as superior. Heroism is realizing we are all the same, and standing up to those that would try to disagree. The Spectre brought his dark cloak around Homelander's shoulder. There were no survivors around to see where they went, or to hear SCP-4494's final words. You aren't a real hero. And then, they were gone. Now, if you want to see another clash
Now I'm kind of curious to see where they went, but, well, there you go. Yeah. I wonder what Spectre actually did to him, but something that tells me I'm not sure if Homelander got a reality check or not, but definitely a story I feel like we need to follow up on, you know? What do you guys think? Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Till next time, see ya.